Welcome to the MamasteFit Podcast Birth Story Friday. In this episode, Ashley will be sharing her 2 home birth stories. Ashley shares how her first birth was a precipitous labor and she was left feeling like she didn't get to enjoy her birth and felt out of control. But her second birth was much slower and she was able to experience labor in a new way. Both of her stories she's felt were positive experiences, and she shares how her and her husband decided that home birth was the best and safe option for them. Welcome to the MamasteFit Podcast. This is Gina, perinatal fitness trainer and birth doula.
And this is Roxanne, labor and delivery nurse and student midwife.
And this is the MamasteFit Podcast, where we empower you on your prenatal fitness, birth, and postpartum return to fitness journey.
Our podcast shares how to move throughout your pregnancy to stay strong and comfortable. Pain is not a requirement of pregnancy. Understand the science of birth and how to approach recovery after birth.
We share our personal experiences as mothers navigating the stage of lives, plus our professional expertise as birth workers and fitness professionals.
Our goal is to help you feel confident as you navigate the perinatal timeframe for an empowering pregnancy, positive birth, and postpartum journey.
We are glad to have you with us on this journey and that you've chosen us to support you. Welcome to the MamasteFit Podcast Birth Story Friday. Today we have one of my doula clients who's going to be sharing 2 of the births that I was very lucky to support her for. For her first birth, we were actually planning to have a hospital birth, but then the COVID pandemic hit, and so this really shifted where she felt safest giving birth. And so there was a lot of restrictions on who could be at her birth, and so at that time it was going to be only her husband was going to be allowed, and there was a lot of ambiguity at that point on if he was even going to be allowed to go. There was a lot of fear that was going on with the pandemic as well. And so with 2 weeks to go, we managed to secure her a home birth midwife. It was actually my midwife, and it was awesome. So she was able to switch to a home birth really last minute, which is really unheard of normally. But because of the environment and what was going on, a lot of the home birth midwives in our area were taking on more clients to provide this out of hospital option for folks. With her first birth, she did feel that she had a precipitous labor, and it was definitely on the quick side for a first-time birther. And so with precipitous birth, it can feel very overwhelming. Essentially, you have whatever block of labor you were supposed to experience kind of condensed into a really short period of time. And so for some folks, they can feel really out of control. It can be very overwhelming. It can be hard to kind of process what is going on. And so while, yes, they are processing and going through labor really quick, which in theory you would think would be awesome, but again, it's this full labor timeline just kind of condensed into a really small period of time. And so it can feel very out of body and out of control. And so because of this, some folks will kind of be stunned after their babies are born, where they kind of need a moment to collect themselves before they can finally greet and acknowledge what has just happened. And so for some folks that have precipitous labors, you may find that after your baby is born, you don't have this immediate give me my baby bond. There may be a few moments or a few minutes where you just kind of need to collect yourself because it was just a lot that you went through, and that's totally normal and totally valid and fine. So don't think that if you don't immediately bond with your baby right away that something is wrong. You might just need some time to kind of process what just happened to you. For some of my clients that are having a more precipitous labor and they don't realize it, so you get checked and you're 3 centimeters, but you're wow, I just really feel there's a lot happening right now. Why am I not more than that? And then all of a sudden they're feeling an urge to push. Just know that dilation is just a moment in time. So you can progress pretty quickly from 1 to 10. You can also progress really slowly from 8 to 10. So dilation is just a moment in time. It's not a predictor of when you will have your baby or how much longer you have left in labor. And so if you feel things are progressing really quickly, a helpful thing to do, especially if you're wanting an unmedicated birth, is before you get the epidural, ask for another vaginal exam to see if maybe you've just made a lot of progress in a really short period of time, and that's why you're feeling very overwhelmed. And then the other thing to take note is if you do get an epidural and you are having a precipitous labor, it may still feel there's a lot going on. Wow, I'm not really getting any relief from this. That can also be a sign that your labor is progressing really fast and that you might be meeting your baby a little bit sooner. And so let's get into Ashley's stories. I'm really excited for you to hear her 2 stories on how she switched to a home birth, and then for her second pregnancy, similar to mine, where she started with a home birth midwife from the beginning and kind of navigated a really different prenatal journey with a home birth midwife.
Let's take a quick break to share about our birth story sponsor, Balbay. Balbay is a perinatal company that intentionally designs support wear for your pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. Balbay was founded by a physical therapist and creates support bands, support leggings, bralettes, and other clothing items to support your entire perinatal journey. I loved using Balbay to support my postpartum healing with their bloomers. They are designed by a physiotherapist to offer unique core support that resists stress and strain over the abdomen. A Pro Fabric hammock also provides a bottoms-up approach to pelvic floor support. The bloomers offer gentle core and pelvic floor support for optimal postpartum recovery.
Plus, you can grab the bloomers in their Soothe and Support postpartum kit that includes a peri bottle, postpartum underwear, a postpartum perineal ice pack that fits into the bloomers. The ice pack can also double for soothing engorgement in your breasts, and I personally use this kit in my postpartum. Balbay is one of our favorite maternity and postpartum support wear brands. We are so grateful that they have graciously sponsored our Birth Story podcast episode so you can hear real birth stories to learn from as you prepare for your own birth. Head to balbaybody.com and use code MamasteFit for 15% off your order. Thank you, Balbay, for supporting us throughout our motherhood journey. Welcome to the MamasteFit Birth Story Friday. Today we have Ashley, who's going to be sharing her 2 home birth stories with the same midwife that I actually use. So thank you for being here, Ashley.
No problem. I'm glad I could be here to help you guys out.
So tell us your story. How was your pregnancy and preparing for your first birth?
So preparing for my first birth with my daughter, Myra, it started off just clueless, your first pregnancy, you're not sure what you're supposed to do. So I was still active duty at the time. I went to the military hospital and got the ball rolling with that OB office. And there was a few miscommunication errors and I guess problems that came up with those providers that I lost faith and trust in them. And I decided I did not want to go to that facility anymore. So I started the referral process to go to a different OB off post. I went there for a while. Then the pandemic started and they were telling me, we don't know if your husband's going to be able to go to the hospital with you. Definitely not a doula. And I was like, what about Gina? And I was like, okay, so no doula and no husband. Like, what am I supposed to do? So I was just full panic mode, like I'm sure a lot of expecting moms were. And that's when I started asking around and got the information from Gina and another lady at the gym about the home birth midwife in our area. And I contacted her, got an appointment with her as soon as I could. And she actually let me transfer to her at 37 weeks into my pregnancy. So pretty much I called her and it feels like the next day I went into labor, even though it was a couple weeks later.
It did feel like a pretty short turnaround. I feel like she took you on as a client and then like you went into labor like the next day. So it's pretty wild. In North Carolina State, there are some limitations on home birth providers because there's just like not that many in our area. And so it's really uncommon for Ashley to have been able to get a home birth midwife at the very last minute. And even our midwife now is like, wow, that was crazy that I did that. But there was so much panic going on with the pandemic that I think a lot of the home birth midwives were taking on a lot of extra clients in an attempt to give people this home birth experience that they were looking for. So did you have any reservations on doing home birth, or did you feel pretty confident this was a good decision for you and your family?
So I felt pretty confident in the medical aspect just because my husband and myself both have a medical background in the military and we lived, half a mile from the hospital. So I was like, we're okay. We're not extremely far from the next level of care. The only reservation that I do remember having that stuck out right away was my self-confidence level, because I was like, I don't know what this is. I've never had a baby, so I don't know what to expect. I don't know, can I do this? And I feel like I'm usually a pretty confident person, but once you get to the end of your pregnancy, you feel like a completely different person. You're like, what am I doing? Is this okay? Can I do this? And you start questioning everything. So that was my only reservation. And then I actually went to YouTube and started watching how people make their own videos of their journeys. And there's this one lady specifically who was like, I'm the weakest person I know. I have no pain tolerance. I can't do this and that. But yet I did a home birth, so you can too. And I was like, all right. So maybe I'll be all right. My husband, of course, huge support system through the whole thing. And just constantly having him reassure me, and he had no doubts in the whole world. He's so calm all the time about everything. He's just like, you're not going to have any problems. You'll be fine. Like, not worried at all. So that made me feel a lot better.
So tell us your birth story. So you hired our midwife, because she's both of our midwives, and then you went into labor like the next day, it felt like. So tell us the story.
I actually met Nancy, our midwife, for the first time when she came to do our home visit, when she accepted me as a patient. You know, I ordered her birth kit right away and set up the birth space. At that time, I wasn't sure like what all went into setting up a birth space. I was just like, here's a table of supplies. Like, it looked kind of bleak. It wasn't very pretty or anything. But then, you know, got onto Pinterest and Nancy was telling me some ideas of how to set up my room. So 2 weeks later, I went into labor, but I feel like I didn't know if I was or not. And so I was, of course, texting Gina and Nancy a lot, saying I just feel weird, like my lower abdomen. Like, I don't know if it's a contraction. I can't tell. And then that night, maybe around 10 o'clock, that's when I had really bad pains. And then I had a lot of bowel movements and a lot of vomiting and a lot of pain. And then it really feels like, I think my whole labor was like almost 4 hours. It was really, really quick. And so it made me almost feel like I blacked out. Like, I didn't black out physically. I didn't pass out or lose consciousness. But when I think back to my first home birth, I feel like I wasn't there, because it was really fast and really kind of scary, because the transition was super fast and I didn't know what was going on. And it was like, hurry, get on the bed. Here's oxygen. And I was like, I don't know what's happening. Like, I feel like I just went into labor. How is she coming out already? And there's like a lot of fear around it, but you know, she came out beautifully and nothing was wrong and it was amazing. But I still feel like I don't remember anything, because I was extremely dehydrated and I lost not a lot of blood, but Nancy was saying is like a good amount. But with the vomiting and diarrhea, I remember I couldn't stand up after I gave birth to her. Like, I couldn't walk to the bathroom, and I couldn't like stand at all without almost passing out. So yeah, her birth was insidious and it was like fast and furious. And I'm like, I blacked out. I don't know what happened. And I was like, my baby's here.
Was there anything that you did in preparation for your birth that you felt like really helped you like be able to manage like a very fast labor?
I think definitely working out the whole pregnancy. Pretty much as soon as I found out I was pregnant, I started just like a Google search, and that's how I found MamasteFit. And I started Gina's prenatal workout program like right away, actually. And I think doing that really, really helped keep my stamina and strength for being able to go through labor and birth at home. But preparation, I know like mentally the...
hypnobirthing. Yeah?
Yeah, I didn't do like official hypnobirthing. Like, I just did like birth affirmations. Like, I didn't follow, I don't know if it was exactly hypnobirthing, but I just looked up birth affirmations that I listened to over and over and over when I was feeling really anxious. Like, a couple days before going into labor, I would just lay in bed and listen to those. Then it would say like, my baby is safe. Like, my body knows how to give birth. Like, my baby will come at exactly the right time. Like, all those things over and over. And that really helped mellow me out and let go of my anxiety.
Did you have any visions for your birth that came to fruition, or you look back and you're like, that was never going to happen?
I did vision like something slow, right? Because everybody's like, oh, you're in labor for 1 million hours. And then you push for 5 more million hours. And I'm like, oh, wow. Okay. So it's going to be a really long time. I had, I think I did have like cooler drinks and cooler food upstairs, because I was like, nobody's going to be running back up and down those steps. Like, I could see everything happening in my head, like very slow and like magical, like, you watch all these home birth videos of people like just swaying in the water gently with like their older kids rubbing their head. And like, I feel like I had like nothing like really mystical and magical about the first one, just because it was so fast and it felt violent. But almost like at the end was almost kind of traumatic, because I was like, holy cow, like I was just sucked into this tornado and I have no idea what happened. But my baby's here, and for some reason I still kept thinking like, are you sure she's okay? Are you sure she's okay? Just because she had a few abnormal findings on her anatomy scan, but then those resolved. But I kept thinking back to the anatomy scan and the abnormal blood work, and I was like, are you sure she's okay? Like, don't leave. Like, but yeah, she was fine. I just thought it was going to be a lot slower and kind of more peaceful than it was.
So fast forward to your second pregnancy, did you prepare pretty similarly or did you have a different type of preparation? I mean, you had a career change and now you have a toddler. So how was your second pregnancy and birth prep?
So my second pregnancy was, everything just flew by when you're chasing a toddler around. And then I left active duty to stay home with my kids, which was amazing. Best decision ever. But I feel like I prepped the same way as far as taking care of myself physically and mentally. But one of the big differences, I was so caught up in day-to-day life. I was like, oh, I'm almost 39 weeks pregnant. I haven't set up my birth space. Gina, actually, you came over. I was like 38 weeks. And she's like, you don't have anything set up. And I was like, oh, I forgot. Like, you just get so busy. And then I also, in the back of my head, I knew I didn't want to let go of my now 3-year-old, of Myra being my only baby. Like, I was, of course, excited to welcome her brother into the world, but I was like, oh, but she's not going to be my baby anymore. I'm not ready for this baby anymore to come out, but I guess he's coming. So I got to set this table up and I got to hang up my lights and get everything going. With Davey, with my second, I definitely made the birth space prettier and more relaxing, and I added a lot more to it, like lights and trickling fountains and more aroma, and it seemed like a spa setting. I really liked it. And then his birth was actually the slower, peaceful, longer birth that I envisioned in my head would happen with my first. So that was exciting, and I feel like I was way more present with Davey's birth because it was slower, because I had time to be present instead of just being like, I can't stop throwing up. I can't see. Everything's blurry. Like, it was definitely more enjoyable of an experience because I got to be in every moment and I was okay. I wasn't like, I have no idea what's happening. I wasn't in that panic mode that I felt like I was in the whole time with my first. So that was an amazing feeling.
So we'll get into your birth story in a little bit more detail, but what was the difference between your prenatal care, between having primarily like hospital-based prenatal care for your first pregnancy and then working from a home birth midwife from like day one? Because in our area, you have to hire Nancy like the moment that you find out that you're pregnant, otherwise she books up. So how was the difference between prenatal care this time?
So my second time around, I called Nancy right away when I got the positive pregnancy test, and I got on her schedule, and then I got to go to her backup OB provider in Raleigh, and I didn't have to switch a bunch like I did with my first. The backup care was fine. I just would go there for labs and ultrasound, but they actually closed I don't remember now. I was like 35 weeks. It was right before my GBS swab. They were just like, we're just closing our clinic. And I was like, oh, okay. And so thankfully, Nancy was really good friends with a midwife at a family practice up in Raleigh. And that family practice clinic took us in to be the backup providers to run the labs and x-rays and things like that. But doing all my prenatal care with Nancy the second time around was so relaxing and so comforting, because she just has this aura around her. She just makes you feel like you're the most amazing family on earth and that you're doing the most amazing thing. And you're just so excited and so relaxed every time you see her. We actually did one of our prenatal visits outside. She didn't have the keys to her office. And so we drove to one of her properties nearby where her and her husband were building a house. And so we got to lay a blanket on the ground and do the exam and do everything outside, and having my daughter at every single visit. And she would always do the gel and the Doppler with Nancy and hold it and listen to the baby's heartbeat. And Nancy would just explain everything to her. Like, it makes you just melt into a puddle every visit. And you could spend over an hour with your midwife every visit, which is amazing, versus the 2 minutes I was lucky if I got with the OB previously with my first pregnancy. So huge difference.
So it sounds like just the difference between your prenatal care and preparation for birth. Your second pregnancy was just so much more relaxed and calm. You had the same provider the whole time. Like, probably felt more heard during your appointments compared to your first pregnancy where you're kind of switching to a bunch of different providers. We have this whole like pandemic that's happening. So I could kind of see why your births were a little bit more chaotic versus more peaceful. So tell us your second birth story.
So my second birth with Davy, it started off almost the same where I was like, yeah, these are contractions, but I had a lot of Braxton Hicks or warm up, as Nancy would call it, with him. I had warm up with him since 30 weeks. So I was like, oh, another day of warm up. And then I started timing them because I was like, this is a lot of warm up and it's happening. Like these contractions are happening more frequent. And I remember timing them and like sending it to Gina, and Gina was like, wow, that's, I can't remember what you said now. You were just like warm up / early labor. She's like, that's some very significant warm up. Cause, I was like, is this still warm up? I don't know what's going on. But so his was slower. So I guess it was warm up or early labor for about half the day. And then in the early afternoon, that's when I called and was like, yeah, I think you guys need to come over because they're starting to get a lot stronger and I'm starting to get a little worried. I could tell when I'm starting to feel a little bit worried, then I know it's really picking up, not quite to transition yet, but just feeling like nobody's here. What if something happens? Where's Gina and where's Nancy?
So I found the text that you sent me. So you're like, Nancy said warm up or labor, LOL, -1 station, 90% of phase, 4 centimeters. She said just keep checking in with her. And I was like, that's pretty good for a warm-up.
That's right. She checked me first. And then I was like, Gina, Nancy says it's still warm-up. Because that's just how calm Nancy is. Because, she probably has seen that tons of times before. So she's like, yep, could be warm-up. And I'm like, okay. And then she's got to go feed her chickens and she'll be back. And so I was like, all right, I can do this. I can wait until she gets back from feeding her chickens. But she just, even by doing that, by going and running an errand, she just makes you relax. You're just like, okay, she's not worried. I'm not worried, right? So it was way more relaxed and way more enjoyable. I did have a harder time, I feel like, endurance-wise, because it was so much longer. Even though I still worked out quite a bit through that pregnancy, maybe I didn't work out as much just because I was busy with my toddler. But I remember not wanting to stand. I just wanted to stay down on my knees, rocking or on all fours. And Nancy and Gina were like, you need to stand up. Like, you need to stand up. Like, you need to do lunges. And I was like, tell me to do lunge one more time and I'm never getting up again. So I feel like my stamina definitely wasn't as strong for that long of a labor, but I mean, I did it. So it worked, obviously. So I just had to do way more positioning. With Myra, she was coming out without any positioning, I could have just laid there in a ball and she would have just flown out, I feel like. But with Davey, I had to do all sorts of different positions to get him to further descend. So thankful that I had the birth team I did. Otherwise, I feel like those are the type of labors that could have the potential to stall out and get other interventions. But thankfully, you guys were telling me all the different positions to keep getting into to get him to keep dropping down.
Yeah, you did awesome. At one point, you kept rocking into the same hip over and over again, which was like my big clue that you were going to start pushing soon. So whenever I see someone like repeatedly rock into like their left leg, where they're like really favoring it, that's usually like one of my clues. I'm like, oh, we're probably going to see a baby too. And then we did, which was always like very fun for that to be like confirmed for me.
Yes, that was amazing.
So what were some things that made both your birth experiences like a really positive experience for you?
Really positive experience, just being able to find a provider and to find a whole birth, not just the one provider, but the whole birth team. And my husband and a partner that fully listens to you and is on board with what you feel like is right and what you want to do. Because at the end of the day, you're the person with the baby inside of you with the instincts of what you feel like needs to happen. So you really need to surround yourself with a team that believes you and a team that will listen to you to make you feel comfortable and help you however you need it. And having that amazing support system in that team made it a completely positive experience. I didn't have anybody people will complain about their nurse or OB or somebody. I didn't have a negative person in my circle. Like I didn't have anybody interrupting my circle, like to bring in any type of negativity or to, I guess, worry me or anything. So that just made, that birth team really made everything completely positive.
Was there anything that you wish you like better understood before your birth or wish you had done differently for either of them?
I remember with my first birth, I wish I understood better the transition period and pushing, because I remember when I was pushing, I kept second guessing myself a lot. Like, do I breathe like this? Do I do this? And I feel like that was just my fault, because I could have rewatched like the lessons in the videos and like the book that I had from you, because I remember I think I might have taken your course a little bit too early, because your course had everything in it for a childbirth prep. But then I was like, I forgot everything. Oh no, I just felt like I forgot everything and I didn't know what to do. But I mean, you guys obviously were telling me what to do. I guess I wanted to see, in that moment in time, I wanted to see like a diagram in my head of what was happening and how to do it, because I was just overthinking, like way too overthinking. I should have just pushed exactly what you were saying, how you were saying to push, like, and not overthought it. But I was like, oh man, I should have like studied this more. Like, I was just like, oh man. And then as far as like the actual birth process, I don't think there is anything. There's nothing that really came to my mind that I wish I better understood, just because I trusted you guys so much. And I had Josh there and I just felt like I didn't need anything else.
What advice do you have for others that are trying to decide if they want to have a home birth, or maybe their partner is feeling hesitant, or what advice would you give to yourself when you were kind of in your different birth preparation situations?
Advice I have is don't lose confidence in yourself, especially like I thought I was a pretty confident individual, but as soon as I got my third trimester of pregnancy, I felt like I had no confidence in anything. I was like, is this the right shoe for my foot? Like, I don't know. Like, I felt like I didn't know anything. So don't lose confidence in yourself, because you were chosen to have this baby for a reason, and you have instincts for a reason. Like, that's how you were made. So that's why you feel certain ways. So don't second guess your instincts and don't lose your confidence. And then as far as it goes with advice to the partners, I know my husband has gotten a lot of flack from his buddies, like, how, we would never do that. We can't do that, like stuff like that. And he's like, I trust my wife and I trust my midwife and I trust Gina, and like, I believe that she can do it. Like, he had more confidence in me than I've ever had in myself. So I would say just having that trust with your partner. And then also you could encourage them saying, I can do this. I know I can do this. And as long as you have the right birth team surrounding you, it's going to be a great experience for everybody.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ashley, for one, letting me support you during 2 of your births. I hope I could be there for all of your future ones as well. And thank you so much for sharing your story on our podcast.
Yeah, no problem. Oh, actually, I'm sorry. I forgot one little piece of advice I wanted to add in. No one should ever miss the opportunity to feel the extremely intense power and the love of bringing your baby earthside, as long as you obviously can control it. There's some things you can't control that come up, but if you can control it, then don't purposefully skip out on that opportunity to go through the experience of bringing your baby to this side.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing your story with our listeners, and I hope you have a great day.
Thanks, guys.
The MamasteFit Podcast Birth Story Friday episodes are sponsored by Balbe, a perinatal clothing company that supports your pregnancy, birth, and beyond with their expertly curated support wear garments. Use code MamasteFit for 15% off your order.